Welcome to the Spirit Soul Series podcast, and we're back with another episode with Supriya Chechi. And today we're gonna continue with the 12th chapter, text 3 and 4. So I'll just start the incantation. So yeah, Hare Krishna Supriya Chechi. Welcome
Hare
back to
Krishna. You're happy
the.
to be back.
Yeah, I'll just start the incantation. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Datati Swapadantikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kantha Radha Kantha Namostate तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी ऋषभानु सुदेवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नाम्ने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारणे श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवसादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरवारधारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरवारधारी यशोदनंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदनंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरावनचारी यमुना तीरावनचारी जय श्री प्रभुपाद हरे कृष्ण
Connection is kind of going lost. Yeah, the
uh
volume.
it's like, is it fine now?
Is it okay now?
I can hear you. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's fine. But when you were
Oh,
doing the prayers, it was just getting completely stuck and there were blank sections. I'm not sure why.
oh, okay,
Anyway, if it's okay now, we just carry on.
okay. So I'll just share my screen. Can you see? Yeah.
See, see, the sound is coming and it's showing connection lost.
Connection lost. Is it showing? Is there any like net? Your internet is a little weak or something, or is that
See, the voice is breaking. It's showing connection lost.
okay? Because I also in your window also I can see that it's like slow. It's
Yeah, I
there's a little
don't
bit
know
of
if
break.
the connection lost. I think it has to be at your end. You're not
Uh,
at my end. It started after I attached this. Can you hear me
okay.
now?
I can hear you.
Can you hear
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
this stuff which I attached?
Uh, Maybe you can do it without it then. Let's see.
That's right.
Because yeah, net is showing it's working on my end. Let me just see the internet speed test. Let me just try doing that. Yeah, internet is fine. Kind of like
You're doing a speed test.
yeah, just to check if there's like internet is fine. Internet is fine on
Right.
my end.
Signal
Uh,
strength. No? Signal
yeah,
strength.
yeah, internet is
Okay.
fine on my end because the
Okay. Now
download
I
speed
think
is like
let's
I think it's
let's
fine now. No?
continue. Yeah, it's
Okay, okay,
fine now. It's that other stuff, that
okay, okay.
device, and I added it. Okay, so we do two and three, no? Sorry, three and
Three
four.
and four. Yeah.
Okay, we chant it together three times.
Okay. ये
Ye
त्व अक्षरम्
aksharam
अनिर्देश्यम्
anirudeshyam
अव्यक्तं
avyaktam
पर्युपासते
paripasate
सर्वत्रगम्
sarvatragam
अचिन्त्यं च
achinthyam cha
कुटस्थम्
kudastam
अचलं
achalam
ध्रुवम्
dhruvam
संयमेन्द्रियाग्रामम्
sanyameन्द्riyagramam
सर्वात्मा
sarvatra
समाभूतयः
samabudhaya
ते
re
प्राप्नुवन्ति माम् एव
bhagavan
सर्वभूता हि ते रतः
sarvabhutahiteraha. Okay, again.
ये
Ye
त्व
tva
अक्षरम्
aksharam
अनिर्देश्यम्
anirudeshyam
अव्यक्तं
avyaktam
पर्युपासते
paryupasate
सर्वात्र घम् अचिन्त्यं च हुतास्तं अचलं ध्रुवं सनियामेन्द्रियाग्रामं सर्वात्र समाबुद्धयः ते प्राप्नुवन्ति मम एव सर्वभूताहिते रतः ये च अक्षरम् अनिर्देश्यम् अव्यक्तं पर्युपासते सर्वत्र गम् अचिन्त्यं च कुतस्थम् अचलं ध्रुवम् सनियामेन्द्रियाग्रामं सर्वत्र समबुद्धयः ते प्राप्नुवन्ति मम एव सर्वभूताहिते रतः.
Okay, please read the translation.
But those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed, and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engaged in the welfare of all at last achieve me.
Okay, so so he's talking about the other category because the question is about which is superior, which is better. So, but those who fully worship the unmanifested, that is the impersonal, that which is formless, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engaged in the welfare of all at last achieve me. So meaning there is still hope, but it's just a more tedious and problematic path to take. Because Arjuna's question was which is better, personal worship or the worship of the impersonal Brahman? If you like, can you read the purport?
Yeah.
Those who don't
Tho-
know, yeah.
Those who do not directly worship the supreme Godhead Krishna but who attempt to achieve the same goal by an indirect process also ultimately achieve the same goal, Sri Krishna. After many births, the man of wisdom seeks refuge in me, knowing that Vasudeva is all. When a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. If one approaches the Godhead by the method mentioned in this verse, he has to control the senses, render service to everyone, and engage in the welfare of all beings. It is inferred that one has to approach Lord Krishna, otherwise there is no perfect realization. Often there is much penance involved before one fully surrenders unto him. In order to perceive the supersoul within the individual soul, one has to cease the sensual activities of seeing, hearing, tasting, working, etc. Then one comes to understand that the Supreme Soul is present everywhere. Realizing this, one envies no living entity. He sees no difference between man and animal because he sees soul only, not the outer covering. But for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult.
Okay, just to pick on the second one, the last sentence, but for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult. If that's the case, why is it such a popular and attractive option for most modern seekers? Because if you analyze the kind of gurus who are popular now and what they're actually preaching and teaching, you will see that quite a few of the prominent ones fall in this category of impersonal worship.
Hmm.
So why is it just so attractive? If it's for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult.
I
And
think,
yet they say,
yeah, sorry, you were saying?
no, it's like they don't understand that's very difficult or that they're
Yeah.
actually not very seriously seeking a spiritual solution.
Hmm.
Because if you're seriously seeking a spiritual solution, you won't go for something that is so difficult and that's almost impossible to achieve, no?
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah,
What,
like
what
so
are
I
your
guess my this thing is like when it comes to this idea, like most of the impersonal conception is based on like the one is that it's based on the idea that everything is one,
everything
and
is, yeah,
also it takes God out of the picture, so it has like this atheistic sort of tone
flavor,
to it, yeah,
flavor. Yeah.
flavor to it, and so most of let's say like Western society and like other modern societies and all that.
Mm.
Uh, they are kind of disillusioned with the idea of religion anyways. So they
Mhm.
this kind of belief, even though they still don't understand what actually a lot of things, what a lot of it means, the idea that everything is one and so even God is one, that fits a bit more into what they believe in. So then it's easier for them to like those kinds of like that kind of idea. But I feel like once they get into it, then they realize like there's nothing much that can hold them into it after that. Because at the end of the day, like everybody needs some. Uh, they still will want to know, like why does this thing, like why, if everything is one, but still, like what, how do I deal with the day-to-day things of life, like how does, like like what is how, if everything is one, how that doesn't really help me when I have to like face difficulties with somebody else, or like that. So I don't know, but in the end of the day, I think it's easier to understand that because it's like it fits into like in this modern like post religion sort of mindset where they want, they don't, they're kind of disillusioned with their Christian belief or maybe something that they grew up with. So then they find this philosophy more attractive because it doesn't have any religion in it that much.
It's
The central,
spiritual but not religious, as they
yeah,
say. No?
spiritual, yeah,
Spiritual but not religious.
yeah.
But also, I think that, like you correctly pointed out, in impersonal worship, if everything is one, then there is no, it is not like we are different from the object of our worship or the object of our concentration. So we don't have to surrender to that higher force. This concept of surrender is very off putting for the modern mind, because everything that we are trained to do goes against it. We are not supposed to take a humble and lower position. You go for a job interview, you're in the marriage market, you're wooing somebody. If you say I am humble and I am, your servant, and that mentality, if you cultivate to serve someone else, it's considered like it puts you, shows you up in a very poor light. You're always meant to you're trained or encouraged to be competitive and to outsmart and leave others behind. That's what you're rewarded for. So you could just see the competition even amongst bloggers and blogs and YouTube channels. The same recipe, you will have like say 10, 15 different people vying for top subscribers, the same type of recipes, let's say. So it's, I think it's totally against, goes against the grain of their thinking to say not impersonal but personal, a God who we make the object of our worship, and we understand we are part of that God, but basically our job is to surrender and to serve. I think that it's a very difficult concept to accept. That's why they prefer this impersonal, where we all merge and there's no
Uh,
real difference, no real relationship that is built. Because the relationship
Also,
is, yeah,
yeah, sorry. Go ahead. What are you saying? Sorry.
no, yeah,
So
you go.
I was just gonna add also, like I've also heard, like I think it was, I don't know which podcast, but I think it maybe in that there's a podcast called Theology Unleashed. I may have heard from there, but they were saying like this thing of like the idea of like loving God, no, that kind of idea is not um so much talked about in, let's say, even like any other religion that's there apart from even even like in Hinduism also, the idea that you can like love God and all that stuff in many other parts is not really talked about much, except in like various bhakti parts and all that it's talked. But
Right.
even like if you take in most of the Western societies, and even like um in the Eastern society, like in the Eastern side, like if you take Islam for example, Islam believes in the idea. Islam believes of like a more of like it has like a more of Advaitic Vedantic sort of conception of God, which is like everything is one sort of, they have everything is one sort of belief actually in that. And even like Christianity also, like they have the idea of God and that God will save them or God will save them from any danger and all that, but the emphasis is not placed on the love. Whereas in the bhakti part, like you actually have like pastimes where they'll explain Krishna, and they'll explain all these things in very depth, in a lot of depth. That's why Prabhupada says, no, like you can follow any God, but here I can tell you the address of God, the name, and
Address.
that name, the
Parents' names.
parents' names and all these things and all. So that you don't get in any other place. Maybe in like
Mm,
Christianity, you may have like like where Christ was born in Bethlehem, and uh, like about Mary, and maybe his, I think, apostles and all these different things. You have some idea about it, but they don't go into so much in depth, like about we don't know like
mm,
how Christ was when he was born, let's say, for example, but you have the idea of how Krishna was born, let's say. So I guess in one is also how it's presented, like that
mm,
they kind of, because it's not, maybe like, not, there's not much of depth. A lot of people end up getting maybe disinterested in it, and then because of that disinterest, they think all religions that are having God will also be the same way. So when
mm.
they hear this concept of impersonalism, it's more attractive.
It
They
appeals. Yeah.
they might even end up skipping Krishna consciousness also, even if somebody told them, because they'll be like, oh, I'll
Mm.
be the same thing only. So that also is there, I feel like.
There is a prominent ISKCON leader. His spiritual name is Ravindra Swarup, and I
Hmm.
think he's in Philadelphia, based in the Philadelphia ISKCON temple. So he was a hardcore Christian Catholic, probably not sure, studying
Hmm.
theology, and he says what attracted him to ISKCON is because he read a description how
Hmm.
Krishna is God, and being the supreme personality, he doesn't need to do any work at all he
Hmm.
does is just play and enjoy his pastimes. So apparently that really appealed to him, because he says a real god has to be in that position, because he's just so powerful. He doesn't have to exert himself. Just by willing it or lifting a little finger, he can destroy a whole universe. He can make things happen, vanquish demons. It's not like it is not the concept of Atlas, God like Atlas struggling with the whole world on his shoulder and trying to, like, carry the
Hmm.
weight. That, what kind of God is that? Because then that is the plight of the ordinary human being.
Yeah.
So the moment he heard that Krishna and his pastimes, as you said, such detailed pastimes, and all he does is play in Vrindavan or play in the forests in the 20 or 12 or however many forests there are in Vrindavan, that all he does is to play like that. Once Ravindra Swarup says that something clicked, and he was just convinced that this must be the real identity of the real God. This
Hmm.
this kind of made sense to him. But as you say, the impersonal is attractive, because especially if they're frustrated with conventional religion, with so much corruption and malpractices within the houses of religion, whether it is in Christianity or Hinduism, so much that's wrong. So this impersonalism probably attracts. Okay, just to read this again: those who do not directly worship the supreme Godhead Krishna, but to attempt to achieve the same goal by an indirect process, also ultimately achieve the same goal. After many births, okay, it's a slower process. The man of wisdom seeks refuge in me, knowing that Vasudev is all. When a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. If one approaches the Godhead by the method mentioned in this verse, he has to control the senses, render service to everyone, and engage in the welfare of all beings. That is the impersonal method, is what's being talked about, is to control the senses, render service to everyone. This is, the slower process.
Hmm.
Engage in the welfare of all beings. It is inferred that one has to approach Lord Krishna, otherwise there is no perfect realization. Often there is so much penance involved before one fully surrenders unto him. In order to perceive the super soul within the individual soul, one has to cease essential activities. This is all Ashtanga Yoga that's being described here, starting with Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, like that. It's all Ashtanga Yoga very much. One has to seize the activities of the senses. Here, sensual activities, the meaning is not as in the normal. Normally, sensual means with sexual overtones, but that's not what's meant. The activities of the senses, seeing, hearing, tasting, working, etc. One has to seize it completely. Then one comes to understand that the Supreme Soul is present within everywhere. after seeing the super soul within the individual soul. Realizing this, one envies no living entity. He sees no difference between man and animal because he sees the soul only, not the outer covering. But for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult. It's really referring to the end verse of the fifth chapter, fifth or sixth chapter. Let me see. You know, the one that he sees no difference, 5.29, I think, that he
Yeah.
sees no difference between a dog eater, a dog, an
That's
elephant, a Brahmin.
18, no? 5.18, no?
5.18, is it?
The humble sages by virtue of true
That's
knowledge.
right, 5.18. Thank you. Yeah, that's the kind of individual that's being that level of realization, that you just see the super soul in everyone, and you see, so you don't discriminate based on the external body. Humble sages, but to see with equal vision a learned Brahman, a cow, elephant, dog, dog eater, everything, because you're just seeing the super soul everywhere. So that level to come to is very difficult for the common man.
Hmm.
Okay, the fifth verse is like we discussed briefly last time. The fifth here in chapter 12 is also quite, it makes a solid point about why this impersonal worship is just so difficult for us human beings. Shall we recite it and then get
Yeah,
into that?
yeah. क्लेशोऽधिकतरस्तेषाम्
क्लेशोऽधिकतरस्तेषाम् अव्यक्तासक्तचेतसाम्
अव्यक्तासक्तचेतसाम् अव्यक्ता हि
अव्यक्ता हि
गतिर्दुःखम्
गतिर्दुःखम्
देहावाप्यते
देहवद्भिरवाप्यते
क्लेशात्
क्लेशो
क्लेशोऽधिकतरस्तेषाम्
अस्तरस्तेषाम्
अव्यक्तासक्तचेतसाम्
अव्यक्तासक्तचेतसाम्
अव्यक्ता हि
अव्यक्ता हि
गतिर्दुःखम्
गतिर्दुःखम्
देहावाग्भिरवप्यते
Again,
क्लेशोऽधिकतरस्तेषाम्
क्लेशोऽधिकतरस्तेषाम्
अव्यक्तासक्तचेतसाम्
अव्यक्तासक्तचेतसाम्
अव्यक्ता हि
अव्यक्ता हि
गतिर्दुःखम्
गतिर्दुःखम्
देहावाद्भिरवप्यते.
देहवद्भिरवाप्यते. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. Why? To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. Because we've identified for so long across so many lifetimes with having a body. So we can relate to something else that has a body much faster than we can to something that is formless and without a body. That's the point that's being made here. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme are called Jnana Yogis. And persons who are in full Krishna consciousness engaged in devotion are naturally Bhakti Yogis. Now, here the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitely expressed, definitely meaning very clearly here. The process of Jnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome, whereas the path of Bhakti Yoga, the process of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial, simply meaning it's had a body. You know, and never mind if it is in the animal species or human form. It's very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Okay. Therefore, the Bhakti Yogi accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind which can thus be applied. Of course, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his form within the temple is not idol worship, because idol worship here has a kind of derogatory connotation, no? Like just blind idol worship. You just put up a statue that's made of stone and then say there is God. It's therefore he's saying the worship of Krishna in an authorized temple is not idol worship. Okay, because there is evidence in Vedic literature that worship may be saguna or nirguna of the Supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is saguna worship, for the Lord is represented by material qualities. But the form of the Lord, though represented by material qualities such as stone, wood, oil, paint, is not actually material. That is the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. What's meant is that you can breathe life into the Supreme Lord, into that stone by worship. Initially, it is by proper rituals and installing and proper care according to the rules. After that, individual devotees form a relationship where the deity actually reciprocates. crude example. Can you read from there, please?
Yeah. A crude example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes on the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. But any old box or an imitation which we may find somewhere but which is not authorized by the post office will not do the work. Similarly, God has an authorized representation in the deity form, which is called Archa Vigraha. This Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent, all powerful, therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the services of the devotee just to make it convenient for the man in conditional life.
Okay, so deity worship is such an essential part of Bhakti Yoga because one, it gives the follower the chance to do service, which is and to take the position of the servant vis-a-vis the Supreme Lord. It also gives him or her an opportunity to engage his senses and keep the senses under control by doing the service. Because artificially controlling the senses is beyond a point of time very difficult to do, as in impersonal worship. Whereas here you take those same senses and you engage them, and that way you can say you tire yourself out. Like a teacher takes up the service maybe of teaching, and in one sense she or he is. I have someone who comes swimming, an elderly lady. She was advised to resume swimming. She had only swum long back in her, what's like a village pond. She said 3 times a year the water body would flood and the water would come in and we'd all just jump in, and that's how we learned swimming. Now she's retired, so she's past 60. She's been asked to come swimming because her legs are giving her so much trouble. Why is that? Because those legs, which are actually one of the working senses, the 10 indriyas, the are giving her trouble because her job or service was to the students as a teacher. She was a maths teacher. She said for years on end, hours together, she would just stand and explain things on the board, write formulae and wipe out the board. So net result is she's paid a price with her legs. But if it happens even to those who serve the Lord, people develop acute shoulder pain going on, stirring big pots, cooking, for offerings, and then cooking large amounts to feed the devotees. Pujaris develop very they what is it called, that where the veins get very prominent, varicose veins, because
Uh,
standing for hours together. So this is a price that people pay with their material body in the process of the service. The point is that the senses are engaged in the service. It's not like artificially sitting in one place and just closing down all the senses in order to try to focus on a higher truth. That's very difficult, especially in this day and age. Here you take the same senses that are otherwise driving you crazy, dragging you in different directions, telling you to go to the Lulu Mall or to the Pacific Mall and to buy this and buy that, things which you don't need. Instead, you're using your eyes, your hands, your legs, your ears, your intelligence to do things for the deity. So the deity literally kind of comes and stands there to give the servitors an opportunity to serve him and to purify their senses in the process. So Archa Vigraha, really, Vigraha of course means as in an idol, but Archa come there to take worship. And why the writer Srila Prabhupada is making this important distinction that it's not just idol worship, not like you blindly do something, because the deity actually does reciprocate. You have such famous examples, especially like say, take the case of Udupi, where a low caste Kanakadas was not allowed to come to the front of the temple because of his low birth. But the deity, being so impressed by his worship, just turned around, and even today, nobody could interfere with that. The deity turned his original position in order to give darshan to Kanakadas. So they made a separate entrance and a separate window to honor that event. So this means that the deity is actually not just made a block of stone. He hears, he sees, he feels, he reciprocates and responds. Okay, can you read? So for a devotee, there is no
yeah.
difficulty.
So for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads. and they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances unto the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly. A similar passage appears in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is said there that if one ultimately has to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the surrendering process is called bhakti, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman and spends his whole life in that way. The result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of self-realization because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result.
Okay. Uh, there's uncertainty, certainly, because it's just too abstract and too impersonal to keep the
Actually,
attention. Yeah.
uh, I wanted to also add, like today I was listening to this talk by Keshav Swami Maharaj, one
Uh-huh.
recent video of his. So like there were like couple of devotees. This is I think a talk in America or somewhere like that. He was having this like like a teaching class or something,
Mhm.
and couple of devotees were like asking this a similar type of question, which was like they're reading and chanting every day and all that, but for some reason they're not getting that
Taste.
that
Taste?
taste, or that I guess that realization is not coming or
Yeah.
something like that, similar to that. So he was saying like yeah, uh, that like he was also making the point that when it comes to studying the scriptures, even whether it's the Bhagavatam or whatever, when we study and chant and all that stuff, a lot of the times we'll take in all the theoretical knowledge, but if we
Yeah.
don't apply it in our day-to-day lives,
Mm.
then it's not going to make much difference. Like you have to like in one sense apply a lot. Like it's not just apply, but and a lot of the what the no, lot of what the scriptures will say to do, like even in the Bhagavatam or a lot of these things we are also not doing anyways. A lot of all the stuff, like a lot of the things that we are supposed to be doing for our spiritual realization, we're anyway skipping.
Right.
There's a lot of the times we end up skipping all those things, and then we come to the realize we start thinking, well, why aren't we're engaged in Krishna consciousness, so then why aren't we like getting anywhere and all that stuff? Because we
Right.
end up skipping a lot of the things that we are supposed to actually be doing. Like we're
Doing.
supposed to be doing, like there's like certain fast that we're supposed to be observing every
Right.
time. Some we're not supposed to be eating certain things that we end up eating most of the time. So
Mm.
things like that will eventually add up, and then it will also like create blocks. So
Mm.
somebody he was making this point that there's two ways of getting out of this. One is like either you just remove the blocks, you just go
Uh-huh.
and remove the blocks, and then it's fine. Then there's no issues. Then
Right.
your path to realization will become much faster and all that. The other way is like he was saying something about putting like he's like imagine if it's like a tunnel or something, and there are blocks like
Uh-huh.
inside the tunnel. You can either and which is like you have to put, like imagine like the tunnel is like is meant for water to go from one side to the other side. If there are blocks, then you can either remove the blocks, which will allow the water to pass properly and go to the other side and all stuff, or if the blocks are there, you put a lot of pressure on one side,
Right.
which will dismantle all the blocks as it goes.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
like you put so much pressure on your practice, and you put a lot of you like your
Uh,
whatever your practice you're doing, if you do it with a lot of intensity, then
right.
eventually maybe the blocks will also disappear after a
And
point.
absorption, I
Yeah,
think the key is this
yeah,
absorption in what you are able to do.
yeah,
Even if
yeah,
you can't follow all the other things, like he's saying, the intensity, then that will push the blocks out, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what he was saying.
Nice. Mm.
He was talking about. I was very interesting talk. Like like
Mm. Mm.
normally, like people will be asking questions to him, and he'll have like, certain like, generally it'll be like a, very like lively interaction and very fun, and this that. But this was like a very serious, I don't know why it felt like a very like, they were asking like, very like, no, it's not working, and then he was like giving a very serious answer. And you could see also like, based on, even when he was answering the question also, after giving the answer to each person, he was saying, but if you have any other different point of view, you tell me what is your point of view, and then
Right.
I'll
Okay.
we'll have a discussion. But it was not like, okay, this is what you have to do. It was more of like, it's a discussion. But it's one of the more serious types of things that I've heard in a very long time, where he was
So
like
this was at
asking.
the end of a class or just a question answer
I
session?
think question answers only, like question answer at the end of the class. Like I think the recent video that he's gotten is the
Right.
recent one. If you just check, no, you'll find it there. In the end of the video, if you see like these people, like all the devotees are like asking these questions and all stuff.
Mm.
And even if I was like imagining myself, if I was in his position, imagine all these people asking me all these questions. I'll be like, I don't know what to, how is he going to like answer all these? It's going to be very difficult, but I don't know.
Mm.
He has a very like unique way of answering all this. It's
Easy,
very,
very
yeah,
easy and relaxed way, no? It
yeah,
strikes me.
yeah, and very also like clever also the way he's like
Mm.
put these things out. Very smart also. That's good.
Mm.
Yeah,
Right, right. Mm.
yeah. So
Any idea where he's traveling right now?
I think now he was in America. I think he was going across America now, and then I think I don't know if it's over or not, but I think he's still going to America. Uh, various event. He was in Brooklyn and New York and all that stuff and all that. But I
Mm.
don't know. Like I think I think they're paying for his travels, right? Like the people who are in the ISKCON and all these America play, they'll be paying for him to come there and
Usually,
for him,
it's not the organization that pays, but
like, some
whoever
group.
is arranging the program will naturally sponsor his flight and anyone else who's coming with him. That's
Uh,
how it is. Because ISKCON, the main body, doesn't pay for all this. In fact, the sannyasis, because they're supposed to be truly renounced, at the
mm,
end of each year, they're going to give a financial report of what funds poured into their account, how it was used, where the surplus and what was done with the surplus. They're supposed to be accountable because they can't hoard. They're not supposed to hoard. So I don't think at all. You mean if you mean the Brooklyn ISKCON temple paid for him, it can't be from the temple. It must be the congregation that
uh,
collected. And often what happens is somebody in a high position in an airlines. This happens frequently because there is somebody who is a Tamilian who is in the Emirates in a very high position in Dubai, and he's supposed to be his Diksha name is Sri Vallabh. His son recently got married, but he is in such a good position. I've heard that even highly paid Indians who live in Dubai can't afford to buy their own house. They have, as part of their job, they are given a big rent allowance and they can have a place with a swimming pool and all the rest. But they can't afford to buy. But Sri Vallabh has actually bought his own house. So
uh,
he is in a position somehow to sponsor, meaning to just give free or highly reduced flight tickets to so many traveling ISKCON sannyasis. He does it
uh,
all the time. I'm not sure how exactly, because he doesn't own Emirates,
mm.
right? But
Must be paying from his own
possibly,
pocket.
obviously, possibly, yeah. Is it Emirates or is it one of these other? I think it is Emirates. So that's right. So that's how usually the system works. It's no question of the organization actually paying for, because the idea is that the different categories, the category that makes the money, that is for householders, but who are devotees, who are practicing it, to make them detached from the money they are getting, a small portion or a set portion is supposed to be channelized into funding those who don't have the facility or the right to be earning money because they are doing full time teaching and preaching. That's
Mm.
how. So the one group supports the other group. The Vaishyas actually have a duty, or the Grihasthas have a duty to support the renounced order. and that way everybody gets what they need, and
benefit.
those who get more are saved from the danger of becoming over attached and hoarding. They give away because at the end of the day they can't take what they have made with them, see. So the real catch for each of the four varnas and each of the ashrams is getting too attached and obsessed with the material assets. So those who are have the right to make money because they are good at it. So if it is in the varnas, it will be the Vaishya, and if it is in the ashram, it will be the householder, because that's his job, is to maintain a family and do it nicely and set a good example. But the surplus they give back to another group in that same in that schedule, if you like, who can't make his own money because they are so busy just spreading the knowledge.
I wonder where he gets the, like, how he decides, like, okay, which sannyasi he gets to send to various places and talk and all that stuff. Because there might,
District. Yeah.
yeah, like him, there might be other people who will be like, okay, I'll sponsor this person to go and speak here and give a lecture here or whatever. But like, yeah, there might be many sannyasis also, no, like that who are there in ISKCON who probably don't have not got the opportunity to go and get any kind of sponsorship or anything like that.
Sure, sure. That's
Yeah.
true. It doesn't always work out so ideally as it should. And the thing is, most of them who go from India to America, if I've understood it correctly, do a halt in Dubai. So the
Uh,
Dubai ISKCON congregation is lucky in the sense they get classes from all these sannyasis or senior devotees who are breaking their journey en route to America. They get to do service, they get to meet and interact and clear their doubts, they get to cultivate personal relationships with them because they're frequently coming here and going back.
money does play a little bit of a role even in this
But,
also, right? Like
sorry?
even money also does play a little bit of a role
Sure,
in,
sure. Money does play a
like,
role because if it is used in the
yeah.
service of Krishna, then it also gets purified. Like if you give donations, no? Of course. In terms of how do they decide whom to sponsor? I'm not sure. I think they try to be fair, or if they are particularly impressed by anyone and somebody is their guru, or someone comes with a recommendation that that particular party is really having financial difficulty, but they can do a very good job if they're given an opportunity to go and speak there. Then it is a personal decision also,
I
of
think in
course.
case of people like Keshav Maharaj and maybe Chaitanya Charan and all that, these people will get like support from most places and all that, no? Like,
That's right, because they are so
because
well
they,
established now.
yeah, yeah,
That's
totally.
true, because they are just so well established and wanted wherever they go. Yeah, but at the same time, I think I know this is being recorded, but a couple of years ago, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was misunderstood, I think, in the Bangalore congregation and the Bangalore temple. Uh, he spoke like he would have been speaking to a Western audience. And he said something that was misunderstood as he's trying to relativize Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, or put him down, or lower his status, or criticize him. So there was a big uproar. So this is a tough thing for those who travel across countries,
Yeah.
We can always remember and be sensitive and pitch our lecture at the level of the audience, culture wise. In America, as he says, he's a brahmachari, he wears saffron. But in America, you will have, he says in the audience, there will be ladies, young, old, middle aged, who come rarely, but they come and say, your lecture, that point you made helped me so much, sir. May not be someone who's really even so familiar with ISKCON. Can I give you a hug? And he has to say, no, that's not our system. And, we shake hands or we, so that's the culture there. He says you just have to adapt. If you go away and say, I'll never come back here, this is dangerous for a brahmachari, because the women, they come and say, can I give you a hug? Then you are losing a great opportunity to spread the message and to be of use to others. In India, if you go in that mood of speaking freely, to trying, so now he's developed this, it's like a slogan. He says we shouldn't relativize, and we shouldn't uh, go to the other extreme of just what is the opposite. of just blowing it up into, well, he has a nice word. He says, but we should contextualize. That
Okay.
is, we have to put even Srila Prabhupada's statements in a particular context. We shouldn't relativize by trying to say, no, he really didn't know what he was saying. And nor should we, what is that other word? Yeah,
Exaggerate or
absolutize. That's right.
absolute? Okay. I said exaggerated. Okay.
Not exaggerate. That would again be a very
Okay.
provocative term,
Okay.
but instead we should set it in the context and understand. In this context, he said, so this is what he meant, but we can't take that out of the context and just blanket apply it. This what he tried to do before he come to so much clarity to use these three terms: absolutize, relativize. Instead, we should contextualize. I think when he was just developing this whole idea, he ended up speaking to the Bangalore congregation. They didn't take it well at all, and there was if you like, there was like a backlash.
Mm.
They went to the extent of banning him from the temple for some time, or preventing him, saying they're not inviting him. So it is tough for these leaders who travel everywhere. If I am speaking, we are speaking only to a known audience, and we know where they're coming from, or we know what's on their mind when they're asking a particular question, because they're probably referring to this incident they saw in the newspapers, or they heard about something that happened in ISKCON. It's easy. But you go to a totally different culture and you still are able to make an impact and to make a change in people's lives. It's a huge contribution
Yeah,
there.
and also I don't know I don't know what is the. I mean, maybe it's like I grew up with this. Maybe I'm entire, but like it feels like like as long as the message is being conveyed, what is wrong with like giving a hug to somebody who's asking for that? No, like I don't know,
No, because
but
that
it's
is not,
not
no,
it's not
that
correct
is,
then.
no, because he still has to maintain,
He has
that
to
is the,
maintain that. Oh,
yeah, he
okay.
is wearing saffron and he is supposed to be the emblem of somebody who, there's an etiquette, isn't it? Meaning it is for him to establish and to explain, no, that's not our way. No, I am saying he did that quite well, and he did it, and he narrated this in a jovial way. But
Mm.
what he meant was that basically if he had instead got very frightened or insulted or backed off and said, I don't want to go to the West, it would have been a pity. So they
Ah,
also have to keep making mental adjustments and process new situations, face challenges when they travel widely. That was the point I was trying to make. You see?
okay.
Okay, so let's just carry on and try to finish the purport to this verse. So for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested. Oh, did we read this?
I read it, but I don't know. I think
Okay,
you're
we
reading it.
didn't go sentence by
Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah.
They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads. And they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances unto the deity, simply by hearing the glory, simply eating the prasadam, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a more troublesome path, the real risk of not realizing the absolute truth of the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, difficulty, trouble, approaches the Supreme directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated there that one ultimately has to surrender unto the Supreme. This surrendering process is called bhakti, but he instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman and spends his whole life in this way. The result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of self realization because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. Also, when if the deity responds in some unusual circumstances, not that the deity kind of steps out of the marble or the stone and comes and speaks to the worshipper, but you find like someone has understood or read your thoughts, and the problem that you were trying to crack a solution appears. it gives a fillip, or it like gives it spurs you on to do more and more for such a person. Even just in amongst human beings, if you have a boss who really understands that you have a weakness, or say you really love to watch the cricket, major cricket matches, and he arranges your work, once you've had that interaction with him, say he's kept it in his mind, and he arranges the roster or whatever it is, like, in such a way that he makes you free to be able to watch some major World Cup, let's say, without asking anything from you in return. You're going to remember that, isn't it? You're going to figure out that, oh, he knew, he remembered what I told him, that like it's a great passion for me. So you're going to remember that, and you're going to want to do even more for such a boss, provided he is not trying to squeeze something out of you in return. Usually that's very rare on the mundane platform. But similarly, like if Krishna, the deity, happens with the formless Brahman, there is nothing there for reciprocation, you know. So therefore it is more tedious. There is no scope for an extra leap forward, a leap of faith, because nothing's happening. There is no relationship you can establish. There's no form, there is no beauty, there is no personality at the other end with whom you can interact. You're just trying to merge. And that apart, there have been cases, I think this happened in one of the Italian, Florence is gone, where dresses were made for the deity, okay? The dresses were never washed. They were new deities. So there's no question that the dress could have shrunk. But after about a year, the dress just wouldn't fit. And kind of people measured, those who had originally made the deity, they measured again, and they just came to the conclusion all that Italian pasta that's being offered is basically fattened up the deity. Now, these are scientifically, rationally, logically, you can't explain these things. But things like that do happen. Like one time all over India, the Ganesh ji was drinking milk. Remember, it was like a big thing. Many years ago, suddenly one particular day, all the Ganesh idols or deities were drinking milk.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, you kept milk in front and it just vanished in front if you kept milk. And people started to try it more out of curiosity, not necessarily out of faith. So sometimes even a demigod can decide to show, just you can say his prowess and his power, or you can say the Supreme Personality can decide to show it through one of his, after all the demigods are all agents, they are managing different aspects of the material universe as per the command of the Lord. So the Supreme Lord can say for those who have the faith only to believe right now, if some obvious and crude and not crude but very obvious miracle takes place, okay, let it take place. If in the process they actually start to believe that these are not just stones, they can do wonderful things. So that is really the mahima, as they say, of the deity. Ganesh, and also the power behind, because Ganesh took the position of the scribe for Vyasadeva to write the Mahabharata. And what is Vyasadeva doing? He's basically glorifying all the activities of the Supreme Lord himself. So much reciprocation. Where are you going to find that in the worship of the impersonal Brahman? You won't find it at all. Okay, this is what Prabhupada is meaning, that the impersonal worship is just so difficult, so tedious, so much risk. After all the effort that is taken by the worshipper, there's no guarantee that they will actually reach their goal. They may just get frustrated and fed up and feel, it's like some people don't like being in these silent airports where there are no, you can get lost. Initially, if it's something new, because you're used to announcements. Of course, the other extreme is when there are always announcements bombarding your ears. But now many airports have opted to go silent. So unless you're very alert and looking out for a change of boarding gate, or if you're not checking, if you're checking your phone for the latest messages, you're okay. But some people can get completely lost and bewildered in such an impersonal, no sound, no interaction, no voice speaking to you saying, in so many minutes we'll be boarding, we'll change the boarding gate and so on, or flight delayed, or so it's like that. Okay, the last paragraph here. A living entity is eternally an individual soul, right? And if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of the eternal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature. Okay, now what is being referred to here? Do you know? It is the concept as Sat Chit Ananda.
Mm.
Sat
Yeah.
Chit Ananda is the original quality of the soul. There is Sat, meaning it's eternal. Chit, it's full of Chit or knowledge, fully knowledgeable. But it gets covered over by the material energy and gets bewildered and becomes unhappy, identifies with the material body, creates karma, experiences the karmic reaction, so on. But the Ananda aspect, Sat Chit Ananda has three parts. The Ananda aspect or the realization is not realized in the Brahman path and the path of impersonal worship. Okay, see, a living entity is eternally an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of two aspects, the Sat and the Chit, but the blissful or the Ananda is not realized. By the grace of some devotee, such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of Jnana Yoga, may come to the yoga point of Bhakti Yoga devotional service. Actually, this happened to the four Kumaras.
Oh,
They were
yeah. They
very
were.
much Jnanis, but when they went to meet the Lord and when they got into that tussle with the
That
doorkeepers, and
gate.
yeah, they
What
got
is the name of the doorkeepers? Do you
Jaya
remember?
Vijay, Jaya and
Jai
Vijay.
Vijay. Yeah.
They get into a tussle, and hearing the commotion, Vishnu comes out. And I think it is either the Tulasi on his feet or the Vaijanti Mala on his neck. One of the two made such an impact on them, on the four Kumaras, that their whole inclination or their spiritual inclination underwent a transformation.
Mm.
And they, moved from being Gyanis to being Bhaktas.
Mm.
So, by the grace of some devotee, such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of Jnana Yoga, may come to the point of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism, this is talking about an ordinary devotee, not about the four Kumaras, also becomes a source of trouble because he cannot give up the idea. This is really so true. If you indulge one of your vices for too long, and then one fine day you wake up and say, I realize this is doing me a lot of harm, I have to give it up. It's very hard to give it up.
Mm.
Cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifest, both at the time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living soul is partly independent, partially independent. And one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual blissful self. Okay, so he's like losing out on something. The spiritual blissful self you cannot get by practicing the impersonal type of worship. You may get the Sat aspect realization that you're eternal. You may get the Chit or the highly full of knowledge, not as in terms of knowing scripture and Shastra, but just being knowledgeable in terms of what is what and of who is how, where we stand and where the Lord stands. But one cannot get the Ananda blissful aspect. You're going to miss that. It's like a little bit like someone was, I think, yeah, some relatives had come and they were speaking about asking me what made me return to India instead of staying on after my 3 years at university abroad when I did have the option of taking up, jobs in foreign museums, adjusting my visa eligibility, and eventually just settling for what might have been an easier and more comfortable life there. Instead, coming back to the National Museum, all the politics, the basic mistrust of people who got qualifications from abroad, the heat and the dust and the disease, and so many uncertainties. Someone asked me, and I said, it's true, it's a good question, but something, I had like a vague and hazy feeling that there was something in India and the Indian culture that I had to access. I was not sure what, and that I had missed out on getting it because I had had a convent education. Actually, I am full of gratitude for a lot of things that convent education gave me, including what the nuns, we had moral science classes and they put certain values into us. So I'm grateful for all that. Yet I had kind of vague and hazy feeling that something, I was not sure what. So, particularly because by that stage in my third year, I had both become vegetarian of my own volition, and also because I had stumbled upon the Bhagavad Gita, learned the first chapter by heart, started reading the second chapter, fascinated by talk of all the soul, the Atma and the soul and stuff. Never went beyond that at that stage. So I just got kind of like a peep, and it's like saying that if you go to the impersonal track, you're never going to access the ananda aspect, the potential which is actually there in your situation, but that particular track can't lead you there. That was my feeling. So when I came back, it took another 10 years for ISKCON to happen and for this option to study and teach Bhagavad Gita. So that's really somewhere something was prompting me to come back and search in Indian culture for something that I might not have got if I had stuck to my career abroad. Of course, later I came to know that ISKCON had so many branches, even in Oxford, so many branches in the UK. That's different. That's different. My understanding was that I have to come back to this Indian climate, social, intellectual, religious, I don't want to say, spiritual climate to be able to get something that I missed. So
Mm.
it's like that. It's a very valuable point what he's saying. Therefore, he's simply saying one should not take up this process. For every individual living entity, the process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore this devotional service, there is a danger of turning to atheism. Thus, the process of centering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is beyond the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age, in this day and age. It is not advised by Lord Krishna. So he can't put it in a plainer language. This is plain speak that Srila Prabhupada is doing. So he's apart from what Lord Krishna is saying, Lord Krishna actually told Arjuna that eventually even those who go for the impersonal will achieve me. Eventually, after many more lifetimes, like a waste of time. But Prabhupada, as a commentator, is probably knows the mind of the Lord. They say even better, and what the Lord really wants for the devotees. So he is saying it in very plain language that they should not take that path at all. Okay,
Mm.
so we stop here because it's 6 o'clock, and we will start with 6 and 7 next Saturday, next week, if that's okay by you.
I'll Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll just end the recording once. So I'll just end this.